That Friday morning, my wife called me in a panic, pleading with me to come home. I felt something wasn't right, so I left the family business my father had left for my brother and me to manage and went home. Throughout our marriage, Beth Tate had never worked. She was a stay-at-home mother. I knew it was serious because she never bothered me at work unless it was an emergency. I wanted to know if one of our teenage daughters had experienced any trauma at school. All I could hope was that it wasn't as bad as she had made it seem. We had two very athletic daughters, so I thought maybe it was a sports injury. My daughters were everything to me. They were growing up to be stunning women who resembled their mother. The largest electrical company in this region of the state was us. My brother took care of the residential side, while I handled the business. For the previous 6 years, since we had taken over, we had more than tripled our volume annually. My mother was extremely pleased with both of her sons for carrying on her late husband's lifelong ambition. For the first time in the company's more than 50-year history, after all taxes were deducted, it made $5 million net last year. Since our father's passing 9 years ago, we have grown the company into a very prosperous enterprise. I calculated that our father's company is currently worth roughly $20 million. After our father passed away, our mother named John president because he was the oldest. With 52% of the shares, she remained the largest shareholder. Together, my brother and I own 24%. In order to ensure our mother had security for the remainder of her natural life, my dad had set it up that way. My mother insisted that I take over the role of managing her personal investments using her reliable investment broker following the death of our father. I had switched from taking a cautious to an assertive stance, and it had worked out wonderfully for her. When I returned home, the household movers and furniture had finished packing the items my wife had requested be removed from our home. Beth was standing by her newly acquired 2020 model car, which I had paid cash for, on the side of the road. Beth was moving out of my house permanently, and our girls had already moved in without my consent or knowledge. In order for them to move forward together and spare them the drama of witnessing our breakup, she had kept them from school today. It didn't take me long to realize that she had done it on purpose in order to prevent me from discussing the matter with our two daughters. She handed me the divorce petition papers and said, "I'm sorry, James, but I've fallen out of love with you and I'm in love with someone else. You don't need to know who he is because it really doesn't matter since I have already filed for divorce. My lover and I decided that it would be best for everyone involved to have our final conversation as husband and wife be as brief as possible because we knew there was no easy way for me to handle this." After saying that, she got into her vehicle and drove away. I saw our 17-year marriage come to an end as she drove off. There was no real reason why, it was just over. She had handled it with such indifference that I was never even given the opportunity to hear my daughter's opinions on the matter. My initial thought was that she had formed a bond with someone she had met online, but if their mother was chatting on the internet excessively, the girls would have informed me. That would have needed traveling a little distance, and since it wasn't quite noon, that option was eliminated. It didn't matter where she moved, it was local. For a brief moment, I watched two men remove another piece of furniture belonging to our daughters from the house. Then it dawned on me that they would need to know who the furniture was being delivered to. Upon my inquiry, the driver kindly provided me with the delivery address. It was one I knew all too well, so I was completely taken aback. I gave him $320 to spend on a nice dinner with his wife after taking it out of my wallet. When they were finished, I asked him to lock up the doors and thanked him. I made one stop along the way to confirm that what he had shown me was accurate as I drove back towards our family business. What I witnessed upon making that sincere stop by the side of the road permanently destroyed my life as I knew it. She had abandoned me, which was heartbreaking in and of itself, but it was made worse by who she was abandoning me for. Up until her early teens, Beth was the girl who always seemed to go wherever her brother and I went. Her brother remained a close friend, but he was now a lifer in the Marines. The three of us were inseparable. In his line of work, he had applied the values, ethics, and standards he had grown up with to a career that upheld them. I held my brother-in-law in the highest regard and was proud of him. As we completed the remainder of our adolescence and grew apart due to life's typical events, the three of us began to take distinct interests in life. The majority of my free time was spent supporting my father's expanding business because it was experiencing significant growth. Occasionally, I would be getting supplies for the next task he needed to finish. When my father first started the family business, I had questioned him about why he hadn't used his own name. Tate and Sons for its variants, he retorted, have been overused and most of them don't last. My desire is for this business to continue long after my death. Your mother's maiden name, Parish, lends it a spiritual quality. John, my older brother, who was 3 years older than I was, used to bring me along when he delivered supplies to different construction sites. He received a wage due to his age, while I did not, but I made the most of the time I had to learn. After completing the 10th grade, I enrolled in an apprenticeship program to obtain my electrical license while also pursuing online coursework. Before completing my apprenticeship and beginning my pursuit of a business management degree at university, I completed my 12th grade education. My father's business grew and expanded because I was able to use the skill and fundamental knowledge I was learning. John, on the other hand, ascended the corporate ladder the hard way, working his way up and picking up tips from those he worked with to understand every facet of the family business. Along the way, he also adopted a number of their bad habits. My brother and I were divided when I began to bid on and win small commercial contracts, which allowed us to bring in money under budget and save money for our clients. My father and brother had very little knowledge of this avenue. Our approach to it generated the kind of word of mouth that allowed us to grow beyond our wildest expectations. Our father used to say that John was the company's muscle and I its brains, and that it took the two of us to run a profitable business. My brother called me one night when I was 20 years old and living alone because he was too damn drunk to drive home. He didn't want to be arrested by the police because he was at an insane private party in the middle of nowhere. I had thus ventured forth once more to save his worthless butt. I overheard a voice behind me, "James, can I get a ride home with you? My date is passed out somewhere, and if I don't get home, my dad will kill me." It was Beth, and she had just loaded his drunken body into the back seat of the car. Her father was a liberal thinker as long as it did not contradict his beliefs or his reading of the Bible. He was an old, ardent Christian conservative. I turned to see the new Beth staring back at me. She had matured into a stunning young woman at the age of 17. Her smile was addictive, her eyes a captivating bright blue, and she exuded a sense of relief at having found someone she felt secure with. Her hourglass figure would draw in men like honey to bees. Your attention was quickly drawn to her lengthy blonde hair and the enormous mass of her globes. Beth possessed a rack that would elicit jealousy in most women. I could have spent the entire night staring at her just standing there. Her parents were fiercely protective of her, and I knew that if her father had found out where she was, she would be in serious trouble. I therefore consented to drive her home. When she arrived home, her father was waiting for her. In order to conceal the snoring lug dozing off in the back, I pulled over at the edge of the road. I assisted her on the passenger side before leading her to her front door. Opening the door prepared to reprimand her date for bringing her home past curfew, her father, already worked up about his daughter's prolonged absence, discovered it was me. "Damn it, Beth, you should have told me your date was James. I would not have worried." After a week, at the end of the workday, she showed up at my father's shop looking for me. I was getting the truck ready for the following day. With 2 months to go, Beth had come to ask me to take her to her senior prom. I offered to drive her home and said I would give it some thought. After making sure everything was all right with him at her parents' house, I ended up taking her out to dinner. She spent the most of the evening trying to persuade me that she was interested in me because it was a school night. It took me an additional 2 weeks to begin to consider her seriously. We made the decision to become exclusive the night of her prom. That was the beginning of it all, and that was how our marriage had ended. I pulled into my parking space at our head office 20 minutes later. A few minutes later, a very angry but determined man, I walked to John Tate's office only to discover the door closed. I so inquired about my older brother's status with his receptionist. She mentioned that he was alone in there, on the phone with a woman, but the door was locked. His request for privacy stemmed from the serious nature of the matter. I said, "Mary, could you please come into my brother's office with me? I need you to be a witness to what I have to say." Mary looked at my face and saw the anger on it, so she knew whatever I was going to say would be crucial. Once she was beside me, I surprised her by breaking the door, kicking it open, and barging in. She said, "Of course." As soon as we walked in, John looked up in surprise and abruptly ended our conversation without saying goodbye. For the first time in a long time, he switched off his cell phone. He was completely focused on me. Mary's mouth dropped open a mile wide when I said, "You need to get this business appraised and find a way to buy my shares out. You have got as long as my divorce takes, John. Do you have the brains to comprehend that?" I was so furious. I had never in my life raised my voice to her. John questioned, "What the hell is this all about?" "The movers gave me the address that they're delivering the items that Beth wanted moved," I replied. "I saw my daughters leaving their new apartment to speak with her as soon as she arrived." John stood there, silently attempting to work out how to approach me. I knew that they hadn't wanted me to know. "It wasn't intentional," John stated, glaring at me icily. "She's just staying with me till she finds a place to live." "Sorry." We both know that is a lie because she said to me that she was moving in with the man she had fallen in love with. "As far as I am concerned," I responded, "she said I didn't need to know his name because it was none of my business anymore. What she did with her life, because she had just handed me the divorce petition." It was difficult to watch my older brother's face completely vanish. The a-hole was obviously stumped. I was aware that he was essentially a coward who had never been able to confront reality. Mary had a pale face. She was aware that John Tate would take offense at anything that had a skirt on, but she had no idea he would go so far as to take his brother's wife. There was a rumor that he had received multiple treatments for an acquired social disease. "How long have the two of you been lovers?" I responded. "On those afternoons when I had to cover for you, was it so you could go to my home and screw her like you do every other woman you get your paws on? I guess I will have to get myself tested for a sexually transmitted disease because I have seen some of the hookers you have slept with." Quietly, John said, "I don't think that work is the time or place for us to discuss this." His face went white. I screamed in rage, "Screw you, John. There will never be a right time for something like this. Best you get your bum over to the bank and begin talking to the managers or put the business up for sale. We are done as business partners and as brothers, as far as I am concerned. James, there's got to be another option." "We can't afford to lose you," John replied. "We will have to talk this out when you have calmed down." Enraged, I picked up the phone on his desk and called our mother, making sure the speaker was on so everyone could hear both sides of the exchange. Fortunately, she was not out doing volunteer work for one of her charities. She responded immediately. With something approaching fury, I said, "Mom, I'm afraid I got some bad news for you. Today is my last day. I am resigning from the family company, effective immediately. I told John earlier today that he had to find a way to buy out the shares that I own as soon as possible." "What, James?" Mom exclaimed, startled. "You love that business and always have. You're the rock that has made it what it is today. It's your vision for its future that drives you. What has happened to make you come to this decision? I think you should have your other son answer that when you find him because he's not in his office right now. He might be at his home because his secret lover is finally moving into his house today. I understand they're getting married as soon as her divorce is done," I replied. "He's most likely with her, showing his loving support. I'm sure you will be happy to see him finally settling down with a woman who already has children because it appears that he has finally started growing up," I replied, now beginning to relax. "I suggest you drive over to his place so you can proudly introduce yourself to the beautiful lady he was bragging about for months and introduce yourself as her future mother-in-law." I ended the call. There was fury on John's face. He had been boasting about the woman he was in love with for months at our family dinners at Mom's, so he was unable to say anything. Mary, could you follow me to my office and make sure that I don't take anything with me when I leave that may belong to the company? I don't want to give anyone the chance to claim I was fired because I am nothing but a thief, I said. Judging by his look, I knew he would be trying to kick the crap out of me if we were anywhere else. I will need a signed statement that I have turned over all the keys in my possession to you and that I have left with only what we agreed is not company property. I was openly telling every employee that I expected nothing but the worst from John, and he was growing more and more irate by the minute. I said to him before I left his office, with what Beth and you have done, it would have been better if you had gotten one of Dad's guns and just shot me. Should I walk out backward so you won't have the chance to stab me in the back again, John? We made our way back to my office, where my receptionist was working. Joe, would you kindly come inside and see what's going to happen? James, what's going on? I believe Mary will appreciate having a witness to what we're doing. I quit because James took my wife and kids away from me, I replied. I got a call to be served with divorce papers, Joan inquired. The address that the movers who were removing Beth's belongings from the house gave me surprised me because it was my brother's. Our two devoted executive assistants, who had been our pillars of support for years and knew how much I valued and admired them, were completely taken aback. Let's list everything James takes, Mary said, along with what keys he gives us. We'll all be present when we type everything up. We intend to duplicate it 5 times. Joanne and I will each take a copy of it home for safekeeping so that if the ones here disappear, we can later verify what transpired here today. That simple statement showed me just how much they trusted the president of the company. It made me wonder what else my older brother was hiding. It took us about an hour to get it done. I called security to escort me out and verify what I was taking out with me. I watched as both of the ladies put the extra copies in their purses. My brother had rushed out without saying goodbye, hoping to find a way to avoid the drama that most likely was going on at his house. I would learn later that he got home too late. Everyone saw the top 2 executive assistants escorting me out with our security personnel, with tears in their eyes, at the front door before leaving. I kissed both the ladies on the cheek and thanked them for their years of support. I stepped out of the door and took the single box out of the security officer's hand. As soon as I left, everyone wanted to know what was going on. The ladies explained what they knew. I opened the trunk, tossed the box inside, and shut it. On the way through town, I made a stop at a real estate office and listed the house. I gave the agent my wife's cell phone number, informed her that she would need her signature, and said I would let my soon-to-be ex determine the list price. When I got home, I saw that our daughter's bedroom furniture was the only thing that had been taken, aside from their personal belongings. I immediately turned off my cell phone. I pulled out the divorce papers and read them. The grounds were emotional and mental cruelty and other crap. She was asking for primary custody of our daughters, Bayu and Bree. I was being offered supervised visitation once a month for only 1 hour. Beth thought I was overly strict with our daughters because I would not allow them, as girls aged 13 and 15, to date boys of their age without chaperones. That was one of her reasons for the divorce. She felt I was too old-fashioned for the world we lived in. My view of morals, principles, and standards were too restrictive for our society today. When we had argued about it, I had told her I did not want our 2 daughters ruining their lives by getting knocked up in school. Girls in that condition, in the eyes of their peers, were proudly proclaiming they were nothing but easy. Most teenage girls that were in that condition when I was growing up had never amounted to much. I wanted the best for my children. As a result, Beth thought my view of family structure was hurting their personal development. I went to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a stiff one. I turned on the television, trying to find something to kill time, but all I could find was old reruns of Law and Order, Star Wars, or Sex in the City. I guess I must have passed out because I woke up the next morning, still wearing my business suit, hungover from my nightcap. I got up, showered, and got dressed for the day, making myself some breakfast before heading outside to do my usual Saturday morning chores. I had just finished listening to them and dropping all the messages left on the answering service asking me to contact them so we could start resolving things. My wife, in her message, had said I didn't have to do what I was doing, that we could come to some sort of agreement. Once I had thought about it and settled down, that's when the real estate lady called. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when I turned my cell phone back on. I had text messages from my mother, my brother, my wife, and my 2 daughters, all of whom I believed were aware of the situation and had agreed to go with their mother. Tate, your wife did show up this morning, but she was not in a good mood, according to Miss Waters-Tunn. She was surprised to learn that you're selling the entire house. She agreed to add $20,000 because of the value of the furniture after I showed her comparable homes in the neighborhood. I said, "Thank you for giving me that information. It's too full of memories, so I'd like to sell it as soon as possible." She broke down because she did not anticipate you doing what you are doing, just so you know, she said. "What did you expect him to do?" I asked her. "What choice did you leave him in your eyes? You sold the house and went to live with his brother." I expected your wife to say that, but she insisted on wanting to be bought out of the family business right away, I said to her. "Is he meant to feel content that he is his brother's mate and will remain so for the remainder of your natural lives?" I didn't see it that way. I said, I just wanted to be permanently away from them. I told her that she might be able to fool a lot of people, but I know how you think, Miss Watson said. In the divorce petition, she's trying to take the kids completely away from me. Apparently, neither did she, based on the look on her face. I thought she was going to throw up. I thanked her for her kindness and hung up the phone. I made an appointment with my sister, she's a damn good divorce lawyer for you, for Monday. I will text you her name and office address when I get off the phone. Just as I was refilling my coffee cup, I noticed my sister's car pulling into the driveway. I went to let her in by going to the front door with it in hand. Mom must have gotten in touch with her after visiting my brother's house. From their location, the drive took 8 hours to get here. It must be pretty important, I responded, for you to drive halfway across the state. Connie looked at me and said, I can't believe what the 2 of them have done. Mom was completely devastated when she arrived at John's place to discover Beth and your daughters there, setting up house. What are they thinking? You think you're in shock, you should see it from my side, I replied with tears in my eyes. I didn't have a clue. Do you know how long it had been going on? From what Mom told me after talking to Beth yesterday before John got home, my sister said, about 2 years. How could I have been so blind? I replied. Before we talk further, you should see why she says she wants the divorce by reading the paperwork. I just made a fresh pot, I will get you one. Then we can talk. Connie finished reading it. It went into great detail, with small points being developed into major ones. Everything was greatly exaggerated. Connie said, Beth wants you out of the lives of your own daughters. Most of what she claims is, we both know it. I'm here because Mom does not want you leaving the family business, so Mother wants me to accept being my brother's cuck and accept my new position as his until my dying day, I replied. Do I have it right? I was thanking the real estate lady for pointing that out to me because Connie was now in total shock. I knew by the look on her face that she understood the significance of what I was saying because it showed beyond a doubt just how little my big brother thought of me. Oh my God, Connie swore. I laughed because my older sister had never used a swear word in her entire life. Instead of using the 4-letter word, she would say, bananas in anger, because she was a good Christian. How am I going to explain this to our mother? Connie asked. With her Christian views, she would never see what they have really done. The stigma they are putting on you is revolting, the adultery, the breakup of your marriage, and the way they are trying to take away your kids. She can see, but not that that's the reason I'm leaving the company, I said. No matter what deal is made, I would always feel he was laughing in my face because he had so easily turned my wife and children against me. The only reason he's taking what was mine is that he didn't have the balls like a man to build a personal family life for himself, so he took mine to keep himself in good standing with our mom. Your husband makes business deals, perhaps it would be best that you have him find someone to buy the company. Our brother has left you no choice, you have to write him out of your life, Connie said. He knew what he was doing to you, and that makes it deliberate. Our brother is an a-hole, and that is saying it as politely as I can. Connie called her husband, and I listened as she explained the whole situation. When she got off the phone, she said he will have a team coming in to appraise it for market value Monday morning. I now just have to go over and convince our mother it's the best solution for us all. I went into my home office and pulled out the last 5 years of financial records and set the file in front of her. That's the last 5-year corporation statements and tax returns. Your husband will need them, I said. What about Bayou and Brie? Connie asked. That boils down to what Judge Donald McDonald believes. I would have gotten Dale Britton, but he's tied up with that big right-to-life case right now and is not taking on any new cases. Her lawyer is painting a pretty ugly picture. Connie and I talked for a few more minutes before she left to have a long talk with our mother. I didn't sleep well that night because I was used to having my wife beside me. It was then I decided that after I saw the lawyer, I would leave town for a few days. I had to separate myself from the situation to be able to look at it rationally. Connie called me after she and Mom had a long chat with the pastor after the Sunday service. The pastor said, the one who has been harmed the most may never get over it. What they did to him was despicable but quite normal in today's society because love and decency have lost their moral value to many. They have just become tools that they can use to manipulate and control others. Love is just a 4-letter word unless one's long-term conduct proves what it means. My mother was apparently surprised when the pastor said, your son James is not the first to have his life destroyed by a family that claims to love them and won't be the last. Mom agrees to put the whole business up for sale, Connie explained, not because of what John did, but because she knows without you there, John would run it into the ground. She wants to know who she should put in your position. Does she understand that I have been given no choice but to consider my brother dead in my eyes? I asked. Yes, and why? Connie said. I had to explain to Mom what a cuck meant in society's eyes and what that label applied about the person. Mom has sworn that if she ever sees Beth again, she is going to kill her. Tell Mom she has to put Carl Robertson in as president. He was my second and knows everything I do. If she doesn't, John could override him and would. It's the commercial end that makes us the big money and always will. For us to get the best price for the company, it has to be done this way, Connie. She has to do it in person and demote John to vice president and make it public by placing an announcement of the changes in the paper. Should we warn John in advance? Connie asked. No, and if Mom feels she can't do it, I said, you will have to have her appoint you as CEO for a 1-year term or until the company is sold. You have to understand why I have to stay out of it. I can't afford to be involved because it would be used against me in divorce court to further Beth's claims. Connie said she was going to check with her husband to verify that my reasoning was sound. She also said she had faxed him all the corporate information. About 2 hours later, Connie texted, I'm the new CEO. I will be doing as you suggested tomorrow morning. I was having brunch around noon. I had made pan fries with eggs and bacon when Beth called me. This time I answered. Can we talk? Beth asked. We just did. If your lover or you contact me again, I will lay charges of harassment, I said. Anything left to be done will be worked out in court. We have to talk about you and Brie, Beth said, and start working things out now that you have started calming down. There's no reason for you to leave the family business. Oh, we will sort this out on my terms, not yours, I said coldly. I will be going to court to get court-ordered paternity tests done to prove whether they are my brother's or mine. I think we all have the right to know just what the truth is. And no, I will never return to anything that involves him. Beth gasped in shock and said, they are yours, and you know they are. I believed I had a loving wife until I came home on Friday, didn't I? And look how wrong I was about that, I said. So, based on these new truths I am now learning to live with, I must assume there is likely a very good possibility that I'm really not a father either. After all, we both know John could have been screwing you for years and getting a kick out of it because I was the big sucker paying for it. After all, John is willing to screw any willing and eager if it doesn't cost him anything. Beth started bawling, but I had no pity. I just hung up the phone. Out of a hunch, I called my former executive assistant, Joanne. Her husband had gone through his own nightmare of a divorce from his first wife years ago. "Sorry to bother you," I said, "but I could really use your husband's guidance about what I'm about to face." "Let me talk to David," she said. So, I hung on for a second. About half an hour later, David showed up. I let him read the divorce petition, then I walked him through everything that had happened since Friday. "Let me be clear about this," David said. "You do not have any idea when the affair started, other than what you have heard via a third party." "That's true, and that was heard from a third party," I said, who had heard it directly from someone who had talked to Beth directly. "Then, in the court's eyes, you will be justified because of the family situation in requesting that it be proven that they are yours before going forward with anything else," David said. "Just the way you found out who her lover is implying a deliberate long-term deception on their part against you. Judge Donald McDonald will require biological proof before making any ruling. The judge is a sticker on actual facts, not one's personal belief or presentation of their facts." "Is the judge that strict?" I asked. "Yes, it took me 6 months to get my divorce worked out, but I can honestly say that when it was all over, none of us were happy with how he resolved it," David explained, "because he put the need of our children first. To be honest, now I have to say that his final ruling was right." I offered David a stiff one, and we were sitting there chatting about his relationship with Joe, and when we heard a truck pulling into my driveway, I stood up and looked out the living room window to see that it was my brother John. "Son of a... that a-hole dares to show up here after what he has done to me," I said. "I wish I had one of my dad's .22s in the house," David said. "Sit down, I will go talk to him. And if he won't leave, I will show him my batch. I don't think he wants to deal with the Cape Girardeau police." He opened the front door and pulled the window down on the screen door so I could hear their conversation before stepping out after slamming his truck door in anger. JN yelled, "Where the hell is my stupid brother?" I told him that we could sit down and work it out, but the a-hole would not listen. But now he is going to have to because I got a few things I need to straighten out with him right now. "If he won't listen, I will shove my fist down his throat until he does," David said. "No," said David, "you need to go home and cool down before you do something you will later regret." "Screw you, a-hole. Get the hell out of my way." I left Beth in tears because he is questioning the paternity of his daughters. John said he needs to be straightened out on this, and I'm the a-hole that's going to do it. "So, when did the affair start?" David asked. "About 5 years ago, if it's any of your business," John replied. "Interesting, because Beth told your mother yesterday at your house it was 2 years ago," David said as he pulled out his badge to show it. "I have to ask myself, what is the truth? Because it is apparent that both of you, by your own statements, are making the other appear to be nothing but a liar." I could see JK's face going white as David went on. "So, after making James an unknowing cuck by your lovers and your own conduct, your brother James was supposed to accept it and continue on as if nothing had happened. Do I have Beth's and your thinking right? Was it your plans to then gradually break him and turn him into your personal submissive? What gives you the right to believe your little brother is supposed to do what he is told by you?" John was stunned, he didn't know what to say. It showed me that neither one of them had sat down with each other to really figure this whole situation out. David went on to say, "I wonder what the judge will say when I show him the recorded video of our conversation. I suggest you get back in the truck and prepare Beth for the paternity test that will come." David said, "It has to be. We can now confirm that what you both explained about your relationship has no credibility, and whatever you explain about it will be just more lies designed to try to defuse the situation." I watched my brother walk back to the truck with the realization that things were turning out a lot different than they had planned. David waited till he drove away before he walked back into the house. "What's your lawyer's name?" he asked. "I will contact her on Monday and send her a copy of this cam recording." I opened my text messages, and he copied the lady's name and phone number for his information. "Why did you bring your police cam?" I asked. "It's common practice in all domestic situations," David explained. "When Joan told me why you wanted to talk to me, I knew just by the short time that had expired that anything could happen, so I came prepared." Let Joan know that I am going to go out of town after I see the lawyer, I said. I think it's best that I stay out of the area for a while because of what is coming down tomorrow. Is it anything the cops might be called about? David asked. Our older sister has been appointed the CEO of the family company this morning. Tomorrow she will be appointing Carl Robertson as president, I disclosed. He was my second in command to me. Joanne has worked as close to him as I have, and she will likely become his executive assistant. The current president, my brother, will be demoted to vice president. This is happening, why? David asked. My mother does not want my brother destroying what she knows my father and I have built, I said, before she finds a buyer for it. Then I agree with your reasoning, David said. If I were you, I would be packed to go so you could leave right after the lawyer appointment. John will be on a rampage because he will see it is all you're doing. From what I have learned about your brother, he is hot-headed and reacts without thinking. Idiots like that are capable of doing anything. After David left, I cleaned up the kitchen, then I went to Ace Hardware and purchased a new lock set for all the doors. It took about 2 hours to get that done. I was about to start changing the code system on the house security system when my cell phone went off. I looked at the caller's information and prepared myself. It was Beth's father. What's going on, James? He asked. My granddaughters have been calling me from a phone number I don't know because Beth has confiscated their cell phones, and your phone is never on. Did you ask Beth why? I asked. I've tried to, but all she will say is it's a personal matter and that she will explain it all to us later, he said. Katie and I have had enough, we want some answers now. Beth moved out on Friday, I said. She called me home from work just as the movers were finishing and served me the divorce papers. She said she had fallen in love with another man and that his name did not matter. Are you serious, James? My father-in-law asked quietly. Afraid so, I replied. The movers provided me with her new address because your daughter could not be honest with me. The man she moved in with is my older brother. From what the family has been told by them, their relationship has been going on for 2 to 5 years, depending on which one of them you talk to. My gut is telling me it's been going on a lot longer than that. Beth does not want me to have any contact with Bayou and Bree. In her divorce petition, she is requesting that I only be allowed a 1-hour a month supervised visit with them. Why would she want to do that? He asked. You've been one of the best fathers I have ever seen. I think that she does not believe that I am the biological father of her children, I said. So, my lawyer, when we head to court, will be asking for DNA tests to be done to confirm just what the truth is. Just so you know, I am no longer associated with the family business in any way. It sounds like she already has an idea who their real father might be, Beth's father said. If she is right, we can assume she has been lying to us all her whole life. What should I tell my granddaughters when they call again? What they and I have not been getting from their mother for a long time, I said. The truth. As soon as we said our goodbyes to each other, I got back to work resetting all of the codes. I decided to go out for a bite to eat, so I went to Golden Corral. It was just after 11 a.m. when I had gotten out of the lawyer's office. She liked me, agreed it was a frigging mess. David had sent her the video file, which she thought was dynamite because it would cause the judge to question the plaintiff's own credibility. My lawyer believed that with their own stupidity, they had put me in the driver's seat going forward. I had just left the bank after cancelling all debit and credit cards in my wife's name. She had also been removed from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate office to give her the access code and the new key to the house. With that done, I hit the road south. I was about an hour on the road when Joan called. Just making sure you're on the road, Joan said. Connie just walked in and is being directed to Carl Robertson's office. I left about an hour ago after dropping off the keys to the house with the listing broker, I said, heading south with no particular place to go. We'll call you afterward to let you know when it goes down, Joan said. Text me a warning to give me a chance to pull over, I said before saying goodbye. I drove on for a few until I found the next rest stop, finally away from having it right in front of me. I let it all come out. Thankfully, being the middle of the day, no one else pulled in. I don't know how long I had been at the rest stop before I got out so I could stretch my legs and walk around the place. I had just got back to my car when a police cruiser pulled in. He pulled up beside me and got out. I was sitting on the other side of the highway watching for speeders when you pulled in, the officer said. After 2 hours, I was a bit concerned, so I thought I would come over and just check that there were no real problems. To be honest, I have just been through 4 long days of an emotional roller coaster, I said. I decided to come out, so I thought it was best not to drive. Start of an unexpected divorce, he said with a smile. Yep, how did you know that? I asked. The road south going nowhere seems to come to every man's mind, he said with a smile. He opened up his trunk and pulled 2 cold bottles of Coke out of a cooler and offered me one. We were still chatting when the text message came in. Do you need privacy? He asked as we stood there. Nope, but you might enjoy hearing the call that's coming because I'm about to find out what happened with my wife's lover's employment situation, I said. The text was to give me time to find a spot to pull off. As soon as the call came through, I answered it and threw the speaker on. How did it go, Joanne? Carl Robertson accepted the president position temporarily after he learned it was you that had suggested him, Joan said. Together, Connie and he went into John's office and informed him of his removal. John didn't take it well and refused the vice president's position. Carl then said with a smile, I guess then you have decided to quit. Let me call security to escort you out. John kept swearing up and down while cursing about you because he felt this was all you're doing. So, my brother has lost his job and joined the unemployed like me, I said. Oh, for John, that has got to hurt his pride. Off the record, James, from the tidbits I've heard, I think that was Connie and your mother's plan all along, Joan said. Got to go. Expect a phone call from Connie shortly. The police officer saw a big smile come across my face as I started to explain. My wife of 17 years left me for my brother last Friday. I resigned as vice president from the family privately owned corporation that same day and demanded they find a way to buy my shares out. They never saw this coming. I had just finished explaining the whole mess when Connie called, so I threw the speaker on. Hey, when can you get your bum back here? Connie asked. Why? From what I have heard, you got everything under control, I said. You don't need me. Carl is the right man for the job, smart as you know nothing, she said. My husband spent the whole weekend lining up the financing so you could buy your brother's shares. Our mother wants him out. He will be using a third-party business loan to achieve it. So, get your butt back here so Carl can assume the vice president position. He accepted only if you came back as the president, sis. I will meet you all at mother's place around 6 tonight, I said. Is that soon enough? Tell Joanne to order new office furniture for my new office and for the office that goes with the new position she will hold as my executive assistant. Tell her to clean the rooms out and have them freshly painted. Let her decide the colors as she knows me that well. I will give her a 10% raise when I see her in the morning. With that said, we said our goodbyes. I had a big smile on my face. What's the name of your company? The officer asked. Parish Electrical, I said. We're in about 1/3 of the state and always expanding. Your logo is no job is too big or too small, he said. That it is. That was my dad's favorite saying, so we adopted it as our motto years ago, I said. And I personally still feel that way. We talked for a few minutes more, then he handed me his business card, and before we parted, he told me where the next turnoff was so I could reverse my direction. He followed me out. I was thankful for the friendship I had been shown by the police officer that day. When I found the turn-off point, I took it as he drove on. When I got back to town, I took a look at his card. It gave the division its location and his cell phone number. I took the card and put it in my wallet for safekeeping. It was close to 5:30 when I pulled into my parents' place. I got out of the car and walked towards the front door. Before I got there, my mother was already there to meet me. Neither one of us spoke, we just held each other, sharing a tender moment. I learned that Connie was at the airport to pick up her husband, who was flying in. He wanted to lay out his plans with me for buying John's shares. My father had been smart when he had set it up because we could not sell our shares without the other two shareholders' approval of it. Mom and I got to have a good chat before my cell phone went off. It was my wife's father. "Hi Dad," I said. "What's up? Have you heard the rumors that have been going on about your brother in the workyards around this part of the state?" he asked. "Let me step into a different room, Dad, before I answer that," I said as I left the room my mother and I had been in. "Okay, now I can talk, and yes, I have," I said, "but to be honest, I've never seen anything that would lead me to believe any of them." "He's got lots of illegal spicy videos on a computer in his office at home," Dad said. "Bayu and Bree discovered it last night and called us. They are rightfully afraid to be in the same room with him. We picked them up at school, and I don't know what to do. Call Joanne and tell her what the children told you and say you're giving the kids sanctuary until it can be verified that they are not in danger of being exposed to someone who may be a creep. At no time do you reveal your name and do not use your own phone. Go buy one of those throwaways for $20. So, no school for a few days, and we've got to keep them hidden," he said. "But why would I call Joanne? She works for me, and her husband is a cop," I said. "Her husband will be the first one she calls, then it will be me," Dad said. "Thanks, I owe you one big time for stepping up for my daughters. Text me her number to their grandmother's phone, and I will go get it done," he said. "I'll let you talk to your daughters," Dad said. I was still talking to them half an hour later when my mother came in and said the police were here and wanted to talk to me. I told my girls I had to go. I hung up and texted the number to my mother-in-law's cell phone before going into the other room. I cleaned out all my text messages. "David, it's good to see you," I said. "What can I do for you?" "I came here to see if your mother knew where you were. Your daughters are missing, and your phone was busy every time I called," he said. "Beth has logged an official complaint accusing you of kidnapping your own daughters." I looked over at my mother, whose face showed great concern. "Well, David, I am happy to clear it up. What time did my daughters disappear?" I asked. "Right after closing bell at 2:30 this afternoon," David revealed. I reached into my wallet and handed him the state trooper's card and said, "Give him a phone call right now. I think it would be best that you learn for yourself how I know him." I watched as David called him. My mother came over beside me, and I wrapped my arm around her lovingly. She knew I wasn't concerned. She heard David's side of the conversation and saw the huge smile come over his face as he ended the call. "I should have known," David said. "You have the perfect alibi. At the time of their disappearance, you were sharing a cold Coke, talking about your problems an hour away with one of our fellow boys of blue." Just then, David got 5 text message notifications in a row, so he took a look at his cell phone and said, "Excuse me for a moment. I have to call someone, be right back." David stepped outside and returned a few minutes later and asked to speak to me in private. We went into the room I had just come out of, and I closed the door, ensuring our privacy. "What do you know about the yard rumors about your older brother?" he asked. "Most of the men he worked with say that my brother likes them younger than they should be," I said. "Growing up, from the time I started dating, I kept my girlfriends as far as I could from him because even though I had never seen anything, I had my suspicions, so I played it safe." "Why?" "It seems your daughters discovered something they shouldn't on your brother's home computer that scared them," he said. "They told someone at school and they have been granted sanctuary until we investigate it fully." I sat down and placed my head into my hands and said, "When I first reconnected with Beth when she was 17, she was running with a wild crowd. I had gone to pick up my brother that night because he was drunk. She asked me for a ride home. I wonder now if John had been her date that night. That would explain a lot of things, wouldn't it?" "I wish there was some way you could prove it," David said. I whispered, "Tell whoever is protecting your daughters we won't be charging them, but I will need a few days to resolve this. Your mistake was giving them my wife's number. My wife learned they had called you an hour ago and asked you what they should do. It's Beth's parents. I had no clue, I said, but I did tell them to buy a disposable phone to call your wife. David laughed and said, be thankful for having in-laws that care so much. I'll be seeing a judge in the morning for a search warrant on your brother's computer. Let him know that I might need your daughters to tell the judge what they saw. We walked back into the living room, and then I escorted the two officers to the front door. Just as I opened the door, Beth stepped in. Are you arresting James for kidnapping, officer? She asked. Not at this time, David said. Your soon-to-be ex has an unbreakable alibi. He was sitting with a police officer talking about you when your kids disappeared. Beth's face went white. She had been so sure that they were going to be with me. I guess maybe the girls have run away because they don't want to live with you, Beth, I said. David, do you think I should go home in case they show up? I think that's the smartest idea I have heard all day. After all, they are old enough to decide whom they want to live with, David said with a big grin. The only thing keeping you away from your children is their mother anyway. Just give me a call if they show up. I watched the police officer drive away before I turned to Beth and said, the night I gave you a ride home when I was picking my brother up because he was drunk, was he your date? The look on Beth's face revealed it all, so I added, I guess I now know how long you've been screwing him behind my back, don't I? My mother, enraged, yelled, James, throw her out of my house right now and let her know that if I ever see her again, I will use one of my dead husband's rifles and put a bullet between her eyes myself. I looked at Beth and said, I would run if I were you, she just might change her mind and kill you right now. I've never seen Beth so scared in my life. I think it took her 10 seconds to reach her car. I could not help it, but I broke out in laughter as she drove off in a hurry. Well played, Mom, I said. She actually believes it. She better because I meant it, she replied. I opened up my cell phone and called Beth's father. Dad, can you bring Mom and the kids to my mother's for supper? Are you serious? He asked. We're going to celebrate the return of my daughters to the family, I said. There will be no future problems with Beth or the police. We're on our way, he said. Mom, the girls will need to stay here until I can purchase furniture, is that okay? I asked. Why don't you all move here until at least the whole divorce is done? Mom stated. I can drop them off and pick them up from school, but tomorrow I'm taking them shopping for new clothes. Sounds like a deal to me. Elle leaned in to give her a hug. That way you can be free of the reminders of the damage that Beth has done to you all. Make sure you get them new cell phones. When Beth moved them into John's apartment, she took away theirs so they couldn't get in touch with me. Mom entered the kitchen to let the cooks know that 4 more people would be joining us for dinner at 8 o'clock. After my mother told me which bedroom would be mine, I went outside to retrieve my suitcases from the car and brought in the suits I had hanging. Beth was not happy and was worried about her daughters. She was certain that James had taken him, but she had been rudely proven wrong. Her true relationship with John had now come to light. John had taken her virginity before James, and she had reconnected. Once they had reconnected, John had left them alone. It wasn't until after her second daughter was born that JN felt he had to take back what he had always believed to be his. She had long resisted his advances toward a sexual relationship. It had been a Wednesday afternoon when he showed up at their home shortly after lunch. James had left town for a business trip, so she had allowed him in. He took her in his arms, and before she knew what was going on, he kissed her. She was quickly turned on by him, and they began having sex. We both know that once you have tasted paradise, you can never truly be happy until you have found it again. This afternoon has confirmed that we have found it once more. John said boldly, I am claiming this goddess as my woman, to the empty wall, the seeing, and the unseeing. My female, my wife, and her body response is showing her willing agreement. She had willingly allowed him to take her 3 times that afternoon. He indeed had taken her to heaven and back. It wasn't making love, it was animalistic sex in a raw, demanding, and forceful way. They were nothing but animals doing the most natural thing in the world. Each firm drive by him into her was his way of claiming that she was his, and he would do to her whatever he wished. After ravaging her body and mind for the 3rd time, he leaned down on her and whispered, Beth, John had said I have always loved you and always will. I don't feel complete as a man unless I am connected with you, feeding you what we both know you need. You may feel that I own you, but rest assured I am branded by your tight whole muscles. Just as much after she had gotten her daughters in bed for the night and had made sure they were asleep, she walked into the master bedroom to find John laying on her bed totally naked. She surrendered herself to him willingly and rode him for as long as she could as their eyes remained locked on each other. When fully exhausted, they had fallen asleep with her arms holding his head. Thursday, after she saw the girls off to school, they had screwed each other like rabbits for most of the day. That afternoon John had worshipped her body for more than an hour. Friday that same week he had come back and taken her over and over again, each time reinforcing the fact in her mind that inside of her was where his meat belonged. By the time they were done on that Friday, she had freely admitted she was owned by him. Before they had finished that Friday afternoon, she to show her submissiveness to him by giving him a BJ. Once they were done, she was still savoring his taste when James came home and gave her a deep French kiss. If she hadn't had her tubes tied after the birth of her second, she still believed to this day that she would have been knocked up by him that first week about 6 months ago. After having almost been caught by her oldest daughter, John had decided that it was the time that the two of them admitted their emotional bond publicly by moving in together. They had been so sure that James, the quiet one, would accept their relationship, and after a few rocky months things would settle down. Boy, had they been wrong. He had been the exact opposite. He had caused a storm no one had seen coming by resigning the way he did. Now he was questioning the paternity of his daughters. John returned home this afternoon to tell her that the new CEO of his own company, his own sister, had forced him out of his position. He then left to speak with a corporate lawyer to find out what he could legally do about it. James had listed their home with a real estate broker who made Jan and her realize what they had unintentionally done to James. They had destroyed his life and turned everything he had ever believed into a lie. Until they looked it up, they had no idea that they had labeled him a cuck. They had never seen that they had called him a cuck, hell, and had no idea what that meant. Now, even her parents were refusing to answer her calls. She had called them 5 times to find out if they had heard anything about their granddaughters. Even her text messages were not being responded to. She was wondering just what they knew. Beth knew she had to find a way to bridge the wide divide between her and James. They needed to start talking it all out. She picked up the phone and called him to find out if he had heard anything about their daughters. He answered on the 3rd ring.